He was alone, covered in mud, surrounded by pigs, trembling with hunger. The cold wind pierced through his torn clothes as he watched the animals fighting over scraps of food on the ground. And in that moment, the son who once had everything realized he had lost even his own dignity. If someone had looked at that young man that afternoon, they would never imagine he came from a home filled with love. They would never imagine there was a father still waiting for him. But what hurt the most was not the hunger, it was the memory. The memory of the home he abandoned, the embrace he rejected, the father he left behind. And while tears ran down his dirt-covered face, one question began crushing his soul. Is there still a way back for someone like me? Because sometimes human beings only understand the value of love after losing everything. And this is the story of a son who traded his father's love for the illusions of the world, until he discovered that no amount of wealth can fill an empty heart. There was once a man who had 2 sons. The younger son grew up surrounded by his father's care, the green fields of the farm, and the peaceful mornings of Israel. Every day began the same way. The smell of freshly baked bread, the sound of workers waking before sunrise, the wind moving slowly through the olive trees. It was a simple life, but it was filled with peace. His father was known as a righteous man. He treated his servants with dignity. He never allowed food to disappear from the table. His house was a place of safety. But the younger son's heart slowly began to change. As he watched travelers crossing distant roads, he imagined what life would be like far away from home. He dreamed of freedom, adventure, wealth, a life without limits. In his mind, happiness became synonymous with distance. Distance from routine, distance from rules, distance from his father. Little by little, he stopped seeing the house as shelter and started seeing it as a prison. And the more he fed those thoughts, the farther he drifted from his family. His father noticed. Fathers almost always do. He noticed the longer silences, the distant stares, the growing impatience. But even so, he continued treating his son with love. Because true love does not imprison, even when it knows a rebellious heart sometimes needs to leave in order to understand what it already had. Until the day that changed everything. One silent morning, the younger son entered the house determined. His eyes were cold. His heart was consumed by pride and the illusion that happiness existed somewhere far away. Then he said, "Father, I want my share of the inheritance." Time itself seemed to stop. In that culture, those words were deeply offensive. It was almost the same as saying, "To me, you are already dead." The older brother stood frozen in shock. The servants lowered their eyes. Silence filled the room. But the father did not respond with anger. He did not raise his voice. He did not throw his son out. He simply remained silent. A heavy silence, a painful silence, because some wounds are too deep for words. Days later, the father divided his possessions, and the young man left. The morning of his departure, the sky was clear. The wind moved gently through the fields. The world seemed full of possibilities. He walked quickly, full of excitement, without even looking back. But behind him, there was a father standing at the entrance of the house, watching until the very last moment. Perhaps hoping his son would stop. Perhaps hoping to hear, "Father, I changed my mind." But those words never came. The first days away from home felt like a dream. The cities were vibrant. The streets were full of life. Torches illuminated crowded taverns. Strangers smiled at him. For the first time, he felt that nobody controlled his steps. He had money, a lot of money. And the world usually opens its doors to those who possess wealth. The nights were intense. Laughter filled the air. Cups were raised in his honor. People called him friend. He felt important, free, invincible. He spent without thinking, bought expensive clothes, paid for luxurious parties, surrounded himself with people who seemed to admire him. And for a while, he truly believed he had finally found happiness. But the problem with illusions is that they never last forever.
The days passed. The coins began disappearing, and along with them, the people disappeared too. Friends became distant. The invitations stopped coming. Doors slowly began closing, until a great famine struck that region. Now he had nothing left. No money, no friends, no direction. The young man who once left home filled with pride began experiencing something he had never felt before: abandonment. The streets that once looked beautiful now felt cold and terrifying. His stomach burned with hunger, his feet were exhausted, his clothes began falling apart. No one smiled at him anymore. No one invited him to celebrations. Now, he was just another lost man among thousands of strangers. He searched desperately for work, begged for opportunities, but no one wanted to help him. Until one man sent him to feed pigs. And for a Jew, that was humiliating. Pigs were considered unclean, but his situation had become so desperate that he accepted anything just to survive. The days passed slowly. The smell was unbearable. Mud covered his body. The hunger became worse and worse, and eventually he began desiring to eat the same food given to the pigs. But no one even offered him that. Alone in that filthy field, surrounded by the sound of animals, he finally understood. The freedom he chased had destroyed him. His pride had blinded him, and the emptiness he tried to fill with the world had only grown deeper. Then, sitting in the mud with tears mixed into the dirt, he remembered his father's house. He remembered the table, the warm bread, the safety, the peaceful mornings, the love he once rejected. And for the first time since leaving, he saw the truth. How many servants in my father's house have food in abundance, while I am here dying of hunger? His heart broke. There was no arrogance left, no pride, only repentance. Then he made a decision. I will return. But as he walked, shame began crushing him. What would he say to his father? How could he look into his eyes after everything? Again and again, he rehearsed the same words while crossing dusty roads. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me only a servant. That was what he believed he deserved. He expected no embrace, no forgiveness, no love. He only wanted to survive. Meanwhile, far away from him, there was someone who never stopped waiting. Every single day, the father walked to the road. Every single day, he stared at the horizon. Every single day, he carried a silent hope inside his heart. Maybe today he will return. And then it happened. On a quiet evening, while the wind moved across the dirt road, the father saw a silhouette walking slowly in the distance. The clothes were torn, the steps were weak, the body was thin. But a father recognizes his son even from far away. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. The father ran. In that culture, older men did not run. It was humiliating. But he did not care. Nothing mattered anymore. Not dignity, not pride, not judgment. His son was coming home. The young man tried to speak, tried to repeat the speech he had rehearsed so many times. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. But before he could finish, he was interrupted by an embrace. A strong embrace, warm, real. The father cried while holding his son's face, like someone who had found what he believed was lost forever. Then he called to the servants, "Bring the finest robe, place a ring on his finger, prepare a great feast, because this son of mine was dead and is alive again." The young man returned believing he would be treated like a servant, but the father still called him son. And that night, the house was filled with joy again. But this time, there was no emptiness, no illusion, no pride, only love. But the parable still carries a deeper truth, because this story is not only about one lost son, it is about all of us. How many times do we search for happiness in empty places? How many times does pride pull us away from what truly matters? How many times do we smile on the outside while falling apart inside? Maybe someone watching this video right now feels exactly like that. Tired, wounded, lost. Maybe you believe you have gone too far, made too many mistakes, wasted too many opportunities, destroyed relationships. And maybe you think God has already given up on you. But the parable of the prodigal son reveals something powerful. God's love is still waiting on the road, still looking toward the horizon, still ready to embrace. Because God's grace is greater than our worst mistake. And sometimes, the journey back begins with one simple decision: to come home. And perhaps the most important question is, what is still stopping you from returning? If this message touched your heart, write in the comments, "I will return home," and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today. May God bless your life. And remember, even in the quietest days, God is still by your side.
Some mysteries were never meant to be forgotten. Ancient civilizations, forbidden scriptures, lost worlds buried beneath history itself. What if the Bible contains secrets humanity still cannot fully explain? Welcome to Echoes of Revelation. Explore the unknown.